Yeah, I mean, I say what I see mental health as is us being in a state, any human being, any person individually being in a state of mind where they're not inflicting damage on others. It's not so much that, you're riding this high all the time because life has highs and lows, right? I mean, we can't live a social media highlight reel, but mental health is more about that robust nature of kind of buffering out the good and the bad.
Hello, this is James Cox, the Martial Arts Lifestyle Podcast. We are in episode number 91 today. I have a special guest with me, Mr. Dan Joseph. Is in California, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, retired Army veteran. This guy's written a couple of really solid books. We have a Backpack to the Rucksack and a Black Belt Mindset. He's going to talk to us today a lot about that, dealing with mental health issues and struggles and the experiences and challenges that he's gone through to transfer that over to the real world and what we have to deal with daily in the martial arts training and in life, is a lot about that. But bro, you can say much better than me, Dan. I appreciate your time, and hey, I appreciate your service. Thanks for all that you've done. And talk to us a little bit. You want to give us just a brief description of your journey and what brought you here?
Yeah, definitely. And first of all, thanks for your support. And for that intro, I appreciate it. Yeah, I was in the Army for a few years and was a combat engineer. And while I was I worked on a master's in psychology and got to see how leading the troops really depended on stress management, from an internal perspective. Stuff that I learned in jiu-jitsu on the mats definitely applied just out there in the field, training in a high tempo environment, um, especially during the lockdowns. There is so much that I learned on the mats from the guys that I train with and that I spar with. And so I wrote a book I wrote a book after one of my soldiers. He survived his suicide attempt, and he's still alive today, thankfully. He wrote the introduction to the book, for Backpack to Rucksack. And it's sort of a word of hope to those who are struggling with issues and who feel isolated because of the struggles that we all have as human beings. But some of us get trapped in our heads for too long. Um, and so that really impacted me. And I just wanted to process some of the stuff that I knew soldiers were going through, especially those who've been deployed overseas and who are combat veterans. Another buddy of mine lost 13 men from his unit to suicide,
Mm.
and he wrote the foreword to the book. So Cody wrote the introduction as a suicide survivor, and Austin wrote the foreword as, a brother of 13 men who are no longer here, which is like unfathomable stuff. And so um, I wrote the book to kind of process what it means from an objective, purview, to be a good leader, and what is mental health. What is emotional well-being? What does it mean from a neurophysiological perspective when we are nice to others? And the really big thing that impacted me is black belts in jujitsu, because black belts are never bullies. They never tell people, I'm the alpha dog here. They show it. It's primal, and we respect them because it's primal. Soldiers respond the same way. If there's an officer who shows up, or anybody, and says, "Look at my rank. Like, I'm in charge. I'm your boss." That person lost credibility in the soldier's eyes. The same way how, like in jujitsu, if there's a black belt, which I've never seen this, but if there was a black belt who we could tell was insecure, that we wouldn't want to be trained by the guy, But I've never seen that before. Black belts are always super in control, very humble, grounded. It's and I wanted to apply what they taught us on the mats in uniform. And what I found out was really cool is just how soldiers do respond to that. I'm not saying I was a perfect leader, so I don't want to use myself as an example too much, but there are other leaders, and sometimes I did get it right. And when I did, it was because I thought about what have I been taught? Take a deep breath, ground myself, look at the situation. What's the best strategic technical way through this problem set? And so these are all things that just really touch my heart, in a deep way. And I love the fact that the troops, um, they're fed by that. They're energized by that, and it's really cool. And I wish We just implemented a lot more jujitsu in the military for sure.
Right. No, man, that's powerful stuff, bro. It's a shame that things and lessons that it's good that the lessons that we learn, but the things that people have to go through for that sacrifice. What is more of mental health? Because it's such a term now thrown around. From COVID to where we are today, and how has it changed? From then to today. If you just kind of talked about mental health in general.
Yeah, I mean, I say what I see mental health as is us being in a state, any human being, any person individually being in a state of mind where they're not inflicting damage on others. It's not so much that, you're riding this high all the time, because life has highs and lows, right? I mean, we can't live a social media highlight reel, but mental health is more about that robust nature of kind of buffering out the good and the bad. So what I love is equanimity. It's a phenomenal word, but it just means being even keeled, and it's the same way, when a champion wins a fight, if they don't gloat over their enemy, if they like embrace their partner, embrace that person they're just sparring with, um, there's that humility to it and that ground. It's just being grounded. That's how I perceive mental health. Um, and to me, it's something that's visceral, and you feel it in your gut when you're around people who are mentally healthy, because they
Mm.
don't drain you. You feel restored, recharged, you feel inspired by them. That's what I believe mental health does, because it starts at an individual level, but everyone around you feels it. And it's the same thing with martial arts. The attitude that I bring to the mats, the guys around me are going to feel it. So if I'm being a jerk that day, somebody's going to respond and tell me either verbally, like, don't do that again, or they're going to just absolutely wallop
Yeah.
they're going to grind my face into the mats. And I don't want that to happen. And so I'm going to check myself, and I, like I said, I have highs and lows like anybody else, but it's so important. When this is where I think mental health is not a state of mind. I think it's a process, it's dynamic. So it's having that perspective, taking that moment to pause, to be objective, to not project my emotions on someone else. Because see, the difference in the military is if you're lower ranking, you can't really bark up the chain of command and fix it. You know what I'm saying? It's leaders can get away with a lot, but on the mats, you do the wrong thing, and the upper beltmen, they're going to greenlight you and they're going to come after you, and they'll break that ego real fast. And so I try to remind myself, like, break my own ego before it gets broken by someone else, and
Mm.
like I said, I'm not perfect. I wrote this book as a discussion, to be had, because it's so cool just having people share wise conversations and advice, especially on the military side. I love it when I see enlisted dudes and officers have these conversations that are super comprehensive about the granular details of what it's like to be out there in the battlefield, from both perspectives, and to see that dialogue between the two. And I think it takes a community of conversation to invest in mental health of everybody involved. It's not a solo journey. Like, we need each other as a part of it. And again, going back to what I said earlier, I believe the healthier an individual is, the healthier the community is. And then it's sort of a positive feedback loop, you know?
Yeah, 100%, man. I agree. Yeah. It comes to mind, it's just a different type of confidence for these people, too. I mean, obviously, these black belts that you talk about, I mean, I know these guys, and it's just a different level of you don't have that need to have to prove yourself. You don't have that, that ego and pride, and you're humble enough, and you can, you know, you don't have to just talk it, right? You can show it and have something to back it up if need be. But it's a higher level of confidence for that kind of leader. We talk in martial arts a lot about the purity or the complete mind, body, spirit, and needing all three. And I'm sure you've seen this, man. And I've had a really good friend who took his own life, and this had to be the strongest guy that I knew, man. I had never imagined a guy physically stronger, and I don't just mean, how much he could bench press. Dude was a beast, but how much he could persevere and take on the outside. I mean, solid, amazing, amazing martial artist. No, but man, if you went to any sort of war, you would want this guy. He was also a vet, and so there was a lot of things from there that I don't know and understand because I haven't been in those shoes. But how can someone be so strong physically? I mean, we know how to build the biceps, right? We know how to get those abs, but if we're not strong mentally, then we break down, right? Isn't this what happens? And so how do we strengthen the mind? I hear you talking about communication, about we could talk about breath work, we could talk about all this. Maybe it's a deeper level of psychology and counseling, but we got to have a strong mind to have a strong body, right? It goes together.
Yeah, I was talking to a Gold Star mom who she's supporting me in a book that I'm working on, and we talked about her son and his suicide. And you know, the big thing that I've noticed from my friends and from his story is that when my buddies got back from war, they have there's just a lot downloaded into their brain. A lot of images, a lot of thoughts, a lot of should have done this, could have done that, right? Looking back and wishing that certain things didn't go down and certain people were still alive. I mean, it's complicated. It's extremely complex because when bullets fly and everything's going on over there from again, I have not been deployed to combat. So I can only say this from, secondhand. But from what my friends have told me, the complexity of it, um, it gets overwhelming and it puts them in a state of isolation and they ruminate on it. They just think about it. And so what happens is oftentimes they don't want to speak about it to others. They don't want to put that weight on someone else and they don't feel that they'll be understood. And that isolation is a downward spiral. Now, from a neurophysiological perspective, because I've studied some research on what causes the brain to basically go into suicide mode, which is you can think of it as a software program that's kind of crashing. Um, so there's these certain components in the brain, and I'll try not to get too technical here, but there's something called the anterior cingulate, and there's a few other parts as well in the temporal lobe in our brain. And these areas of our brain together collectively help give us a sense of time. Now, they've done functional MRIs on people who are in a suicidal or deeply depressive state, and the blood flow to those areas isn't there anymore. So what's happening, that's not to say those areas died, but they're less active. And so people lose a sense of time. So what we would brief our soldiers is that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And it's so key to focus on that temporary aspect because they don't feel it, experientially in their bodies. They feel that it's forever and there's no way out. And so suicide is a sort of a logical way for the brain to loop out of that, if that makes sense. Now, I'm not saying it's logical in the sense that it's good and that we want people to do it. What I'm saying is the brain kind of makes this calculation that says, well, this problem is never going to end and I can never share this with anybody and I'm stuck in this forever. And so the only way out seems to end their life. But what I think of it as is they're just looking for that reboot, a really hard, neurological reboot. And it's not suicide. What it is grounding them back into their bodies because truthfully, they're stuck in a timeless state. They're not in the present. And going back to martial arts, how much do they teach us about our breath when we're sparring, our moves, our diaphragm, how we engage our bodies, right? Our posture. I mean, you can't even have the right posture for a move if you're not breathing right. And so we start to think about, is it upper respiratory or is it diaphragmatic breath? Is it lower belly breaths, right? And that that's so awesome for people who are struggling with PTS and with whatever issue, because when you get back into your body, you become present again, and then you realize there is a past, present, and future. We're on a timeline. The stuff we're experiencing right now is not forever. Pain isn't forever. It's temporary. Um, but it's so hard to say this to somebody who's in it, you know, especially combat veterans that I've talked to, guys that I have grown to love, man. They're like brothers, right? And I would never look at him and say, I'm thinking of one guy in particular. I couldn't look at him and say, hey, you need to stop feeling that. Like, you need to just get out of your head, because it's not about just thinking themselves out of it. For him, you know, riding horses and being out there in the wilderness, that's the stuff that brings him back to grounding, being with his kids, you know, being with his family. Um, but it's such a complex discussion, because each person's at a different, you know, has a different level of trauma, has a different amounts, like how many times that thing occurred, the event occurred in their life. Was it just once? Was it repetitive? How young were they when it happened? How old were they? Because the brain's developing till you're 25. So children that are abused have a different subset of biomarkers for trauma than somebody who's older when it happens, or whether it's warfare versus abuse in childhood. And you can imagine what happens if a soldier's in the military who did experience child abuse, and now they're being shot at, and they have to experience their friends dying in war. So this is an extremely complex discussion. Um, but the simplicity of it is getting back into our bodies. And every person has a different way of doing it. I don't care if it's yoga, jujitsu, Muay Thai, boxing,
Right.
dancing, just find a way to breathe yourself back into your body.
Right. No, exactly. That makes sense, man. Yeah, it's scary because, in that situation, it's rock bottom, man, and you don't feel that there is a solution. So, but no matter how bad or horrible things are at this moment, think how great it may be in 2 weeks, in 3 months, in 6 years. So that's that perseverance, that's that resilience that you talk about, and hanging there and getting through it. But having some shifters, I guess you could say, in your life, like you said, if it's spending an hour on the mat to focus on something, and then to be able to carry some of those qualities over into your regular life. The things that we do in the martial arts, or yeah, any art, sing, dance, whatever, something, read, write, but having some things there. So we can have very major issues. You're talking life or death in the battlefield, competition or classroom training in martial arts, or even into the corporate world. I mean, man, look at the stress there as well. Different levels of stress. They don't have bullets shooting at them, but the stress of closing enough deals, or your job is over, or you're working on commission, or you're working too much, you're working yourself to death, not seeing your family and friends living your other life. So to cross over things that you learned from your psychology and your methods here into the real world in these different situations. I know that was a lot said to say, how do we do better at that? I'm talking the average Joes,
I mean, yeah, this is where there's no easy answer, right? But I think learning from what I've learned on the mats, it's find mentors around you who exemplify the characteristics you want. So find those people who have that strength, have that humility, have that groundedness, and then just go learn from them. Just go be around them. You know, pick up the same hobbies they have, read the same books, ask them where they've built their mindset. How do they meditate? What's their perspective on life? And for me, I pieced together my perspective from many different men that I looked up to in my life. So I met guys in jujitsu, I met guys at church, I met guys in the military, and together they each kind of offered me a different perspective on life, sort of a mosaic of kind of mentors. And yeah, I just eventually started finding my own footing in life, you know, based on good, healthy influences. So it's definitely a journey, and I do a horrible job of enjoying the journey because I just want to get to the destination all the time. Like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? But I'm working on staying staying more present throughout it. And what it comes down to is goal setting, like dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin. And I'm a huge nerd, so this is how I think of it. Like, what dopamine hits am I giving myself to enjoy this? Like, let's say you go to jujitsu all the time in the first 6 months, 12 months, you're just getting tapped out left and right. There's not much dopamine to be had when you're just getting ground into dust every class, right? But where that dopamine comes in, and that's, the reward neurotransmitter, um, is is that camaraderie and that community, and seeing ourselves, like picturing ourselves, who am I going to be in a year or two if I keep coming back to the mats? Because as we all know, when you train on the mats for a few years, you realize the majority of society, if you look at bar fight videos, right, drunk dudes getting in fights, road rage, aside from somebody having a loaded gun, there's not much that's going to intimidate you when it comes to like somebody posturing on you. I'm not saying we go around starting fights, but it's definitely not that primal fear that may have been there before we learned how to grapple, how to do, how to throw opponents, right, where to place ourselves, how to position our body weight. There's so much confidence that comes with that. And yeah, so that's like an awesome part of the journey. That's where I get my dopamine hit, is thinking about who I'm going to be. I'll be a little bit more reliable in a fight. I'll be a little bit more dependable, more grounded. And again, not in a way of wanting to be violent, but in a way of wanting to be a source of strength. And you can see with the way things are in the world right now, with the wars and the death out there, it's so important to be somebody who just has um, just a couple percentage points more. That's all you need of more confidence, and then you build from there. You know, you don't have to climb Mount Everest today, but you know, you pick a martial art, you pick a sport, you pick whatever it is that, like you said, body, mind, and soul. Um, I think a lot of this starts with the body, and the mind and soul are carried with it. Um, so yeah, I don't want to get super existential
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
but
No, I hear you, man. Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing, like you're saying, is it's okay. You should have a coach, a mentor. I mean, the best in the world have coaches and mentors, someone to show you a way, and someone that has done it before. So, you're not reinventing the wheel, right? So, if you're following steps from whatever influencer, then you find systems in place, and then maybe you modify them for you. Maybe the ice bath isn't for you every morning, but you find something else that is, and you just have systems and steps in place that, starting off probably with a good morning routine. That's such a popular topic nowadays, and kickstarting the day, and then creating good habits based off some systems at work, and then a lot of self awareness, right? Because you're not someone else. You are your own unique individual. We learn that in the martial arts. I mean, your strength is not your instructor's strength. You start eventually, you follow a way, monkey see, monkey do, and then you start learning to be a little bit more of yourself, right? That creative individual, and what you do. And that's what we're also trying to do in life, right? Is have someone to follow, create your own system, know a lot about yourself, right? So much. I mean, held from the Bruce Lee era, to just really have self knowledge. Yeah. So what do you do and think about that? And I think that's probably goes a lot with, if you want to talk to me a little more about your book, The Black Belt Mindset. We've touched on it some. But
yeah, yeah, it's I appreciate you bringing that up. I was just on a writing tear for like the past few days, trying to finish this thing up. So I'm kind of coming out of that writer's coma. But on the cover of the book is my one of my mentors, Eric. He's a black belt in judo and a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's a instructor at Clark Gracie's gym here in San Diego. And oh man, I learned a lot from these guys, from him and from others who basically helped me manage my own anxiety and my own stress. I had some stuff that happened earlier in life, and it impacted I basically started getting flashbacks on the mats in jiu-jitsu. It started making me go into a freeze response, kind of a shutdown state. It was very difficult for me to control my breath and to just even have words to speak. It was very, very dark times, very difficult situation. And I opened up to some guys about it, and they helped me. They coached me on my breath. They helped me not feel ashamed of what I was going through and my anxiety and the overwhelm and what's called like emotional flooding in the world of psychology. And so I learned so much, not only about the techniques, how to grapple, but how to just control my breath, be in my body. That was huge. Another thing, I had a brown belt in the army. He taught me how to shut my eyes and roll, because he basically was like, "You're too stupid to know what I'm doing, so stop trying to read my moves." He was explaining me the insane decision tree that a black belt has. For every because a black belt's able to think about the move and then the next move, kind of like in pool when you shoot the cue ball and then you set up like three other shots down. So
Mm-hmm.
he would talk about how like, look, I'm going to execute this move. Like, let's say I want to do an arm bar on you, and he's thinking in his mind, there's probably three different really white belt ways for him to evade an arm bar, and I have a counter plan for each one of those maneuvers that he might try to pull. So he's like forecasting two or three steps ahead, including a variety of options I have, right? So he told me just close your eyes and then don't try to read what I'm doing as a brown belt. He said just feel where my body's going. So what happened is when I shut my eyes, I like drew myself closer to him. My pressure game just skyrocketed. And then I was able to shut down a lot of his moves because I was able to feel where he's going and then slow him down enough to get out of it. Another black belt taught me that too, to slow down my pace. And he's like, look, even as a white belt, you can stop black belts from submitting you by slowing them down. He said, you'll never operate at our pace. You'll never be as fast as us, but you can make a black belt roll at a white belt speed. And if you do that, we're not going to get those moves because you're not as thrashy and you're not giving us all the things that we need. So these are little nuggets that they shared with me that really changed my game and made the rolls a lot smoother. With Eric, I was doing 90-minute marathon rolls with no breaks. And that was
Wow,
insane. With a
that's
double
crazy,
black
man.
belt, I mean, that was pretty wild. That was a gift. Not everybody gets to have that, and I really appreciate that he gave me his time. But yeah, 90 minutes, no breaks. Of course, he was going like 10%, right? I was going 110, so I'm just drenched in sweat, barely have enough oxygen to keep going, and he's just sitting there cool as a cucumber. But especially like as with when it comes to males, like this is stuff where these imprints are deep. The primal energy that we feel, that ability to let our aggression out with somebody who's not threatened by us and who helps us control it. Um, I didn't have uh, a super strong mentorship model in my father. Not to fault him, but he only had what he could. He only had so much that he could give, given his background and how he was raised by his dad. And so, for me, it was so important to find these men that would coach me and shape me on the mats. That was really critical for my confidence, and because of that, I was able to move away from the party scene and drinking alcohol and self-medicating to a crazy extent. Um, because I got back in my body, I got in touch with myself. I had a new deep sense of confidence. Wasn't trying to overcompensate as much. I mean, I'm human, so I'm sure there's times where I'm like, oh, but it really changed me in a lot of ways. And I wouldn't have done it on my own. There's no way I could have because I didn't have that toolkit to give myself. So I'm really thankful to these guys for what they taught. And I'll say this one more time, just to kind of like drive the point home. It's not just verbal. This isn't just something we're sitting in a lecture hall learning. This is literal hands-on. Getting choked out, getting thrown, getting tapped out, getting submitted, and then getting picked back up and being told we're not sitting our butts down. You're not just going to pull me into guard. We're going to do another takedown, and I'm going to throw you again. You're going to learn how to take a throw. I mean, that's some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, yeah. It sounds like you're really blessed to be able to train with the people you have. Yeah, I mean, I've rode with many high-level BJJ guys. I'm more of a striker, but I still train jiu-jitsu. And what a different level, right? These dudes, like you said, the art of sensitivity and touch and pressure when they want to put pressure. I think be 140 pounds and feel like they're 300, and always a step or two or 15 ahead of you, right? Uh, yeah, but man, rolling an hour and a half, that's crazy.
I remember getting off the mats. And I'm like, what is this feeling? Like, I didn't take any drugs. I was just doing jujitsu, but I'm in a whole different world right now. I mean, it was amazing. And I remember one of my coaches. I did it later with another friend of mine. He wanted to go be a MARSOC Marine, and he's a good dude. He actually made it through the pipeline. Really good dude. And I was like, hey man, we're gonna do a marathon roll. This is before he shipped out. So we got on the mats and we did the roll. And one of our coaches walked by, and I was like, Coach, he's like, hey man, how was your roll? Because I skipped his class, and he noticed because we were on the side mats. And I was like, Coach, I just rolled for over an hour straight. And it's just the weirdest feeling. And I remember he was just like, yeah, welcome to the next dimension of jujitsu. So he knew
Yeah,
exactly what I was feeling. But that was, yeah, it was so cool. Such a cool
yeah.
headspace.
Yeah. That's good stuff. Yeah, a word I wanted to kind of see your thoughts on it. Is the word bullying. Now, of course, when we say that, we think a lot about children. I mean, I teach a lot of children in our academies, and um, if it's online and suicides from teens to kids, and man, the things that are happening and is just spiked, as well. No, I feel we're all bullied in one way or other. Even even a high level jujitsu guy, but it's what doesn't bother them. Is the difference. And this could be road rage. This could be online. This could be the keyboard warriors. But imagine the stuff that these kids deal with daily. From old school to today's type of bullying. We know that the martial arts has a lot of power in preventing that, not just the ability to, be able to choke someone or knock them out, but the ability to not have to do that because of that sense of, we say again, confidence. But what is bully prevention? And I'll go with kids and adults, and an answer to that, and from your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I actually, so in the Black Belt Mindset book, there's a chapter in there called the anti-bully. And basically what I talk about is how, again, we kind of touched on this earlier, how men can, especially men, can be super insecure and act out their aggressive behaviors because they're trying to compensate for something, a lack of
Mm-hmm.
ego identity, a lack of groundedness, and it's essentially external validation that a lot of us seek, and I've done it in my past. And so um what happens with bullies is that aggression is it's turned into something violent, and it's a way of basically wanting to be seen and heard, but they're doing it in a way that's destructive. And so what I tell like younger enlisted dudes in the military, because I roll with some guys who are like going to the buds pipeline and want to be like future Navy SEALs, right? They're doing the thing. And what I tell them, especially having a platoon of my own in the army, I tell them like never apologize for your aggression. You're supposed to be aggressive. That's gonna make you an awesome operator. It's gonna make you, for guys, in the army, I tell them it makes them an awesome soldier. They need to throttle it. And so when they throttle that, you insert discipline into that aggression. And a bully, like a black belt, would never be a bully. Why would they be a bully? Because they're not trying to prove anything anymore. They know they can break anybody with their pinky. So them knowing that removes the need to be a bully. Now they will be an enforcer though. If somebody else gets bullied, if we see like a female on the mats get, hurt or injured or roughed up by a male, that male is going to be destroyed by every black belt in the gym. And so they teach us like have your eyes open for other people to protect them. So that energy is still there though. You're still aggressive, you're still assertive, you're strong. You can be violent if you need to be violent, but you throttle it appropriately for that threat level. And it's just like rules of engagement in the military. We're not supposed to, there's a certain, there's convention methodologies to like not pulling out a massive weapon if somebody else doesn't have that weapon system. If it's a group of people with 9mm pistols, you're not going to drop a nuke on them, right? I mean, granted there's a lot more to this, like infrastructural damage and all that, but what I'm saying is the rules of engagement apply in martial arts as well. And one black belt told me when he can shake somebody's hand and look at their eyes, and if they're not making good eye contact, if they're super darty and they're crushing his hand, like let's say this is a bar situation, right? And he's trying to assess the threat level of a guy based on how hard they're squeezing his hand and how aggressive they're being with their stance. He can decide to break their fingers, their wrist, their arm, their elbow, all the way up to their shoulder if he has to.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't know that. They think it's just a handshake because he'll see a guy be like, hey man, I'm sorry you're upset. And he'll kind of shake their hand as like a neutral, like, hey, like a
Mm-hmm.
peace offering. He doesn't announce that he's a black belt. Now, if they pulled out a knife or try to smash his head with a beer bottle while he's holding their wrist, I mean, he's gonna rip their arm off their body.
Yeah.
But again, he's teaching us like, you don't go around showing this off to people. It's like if you have a concealed carry, you're not going to tell people, you're not going to brandish your weapon and tell people like I have a pistol, I can kill you. That'd be completely irresponsible and a criminal act. But when you know that you have that ability, then you walk differently, you conduct yourself differently, and you do have a social obligation to either protect society, to protect your gym, to protect your classmates next to you, your unit if you're in the military. So yeah, sorry, I kind of rambled there.
Yeah. No, no, that's good. You're right. Yeah, it's crazy. Some of the toughest men in the world. I mean, some I know many UFC fighters. Just some of the baddest dudes on the planet are some of the nicest, most humble, empathetic, helpful, loving, caring, kind people. Until they need to not be, right? If it's competition or a situation where we got to be aggressive in that training, because it is martial arts, which is two parts. The militant and the expression. Yeah, that's good stuff, man. I want to respect your time, but I'd like to see if there's anything else that you want to close with. And I want to be able to, I want to get these two books myself 100%. And let us know where we can follow you, where we can support you. I love the sound of what these books have to offer as far as the value, and whatever you want to close with, Mr. Joseph. And I really appreciate you once again, sir.
Oh, well, you're too nice. Just call me Dan, not Mr. Joseph. But yeah, thank you. Combatpsych.com. Combatpsych.com is my website. The books are on Amazon. Black Belt Mindset. I forget the subtitle of it. And then Backpack to Rucksack: Insight into Leadership and Resilience by Military Experts. So those are some books I wrote. There's another book that's like a combat psych handbook. It's a more distilled version of it. But yeah, you can preview the books on my website as well. Kind of a try before you buy. Just because, yeah, I'm a new author. So when I put stuff out there, it's almost like I feel bad charging people for it. But yeah, it'd be different if I knew that I was like this expert level of writing. But yeah, I'd love to know your thoughts on the book. I've definitely gotten some positive feedback, but I'd love more of it. If you have any critiques too, I'm open to that. I can adjust my writing style, but I just kind of write from the mindset of stuff that I've talked to my soldiers about, stuff that I've had a lot of discussions with other guys as we kind of are on this journey of trying to figure out what it means to be again, aggressive and yet responsible people. So it's a dynamic discussion to have, and you offering this podcast interviews is great, because I really appreciate that, because you're giving us space to kind of hash this out and develop it. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But you never know who you impact. I mean, the concept of giving someone the right smile or the right appropriate touch, or saying thank you, right? And then even with the podcast, and where we can be all over the world, you never know who's going to listen in. I gained some insight from today, and I'm sure it's going to help someone else. But all right, man. Well, we're going to get these books and stay in touch, Dan. It was a pleasure, sir. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I want to stay in touch with you. We'll talk soon.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, sir. Guys, appreciate you following us. Be sure to check out all of our other episodes and my YouTube channel, James Cox Martial Arts. Y'all have a good one.